Greetings, it's Mark here with you again from Cahoots Photo Books. In this short session we're going to cover a few of the more common issues that we see when people submit their photo books for production. Hopefully you can avoid these same issues with just a little bit of attention to some of the possible traps that you might fall into. The first one is not allowing for the cover flaps. You may remember that there's a dotted line if you have chosen a printed cover. That dotted outline is the edge of the hard board of the cover, and beyond that dotted line is the flap area which gets folded over the board during production. Many people seem to think that if they want a cover with an image that extends over the whole of the front cover, that they should try and match their image to this dotted line. That's definitely the wrong thing to do. What you should be doing is extending the image well over that dotted line if you are wanting a photo that covers the whole front cover. If you're having an inset photo, then there's not really anything to worry about. But if you have chosen an image that will cover all of the front cover, then you should extend it over that dotted line. Otherwise, there's the possibility that when the cover is produced, it's not millimeter perfect in the trimming of the hardcover boards or in the placement of the actual printed front cover, and so you may end up with some background showing where you were not intending. So there might be a white strip across the top or along a side. It might not even be a perfectly even strip. It's going to look like something went wrong. So you need that wide margin over the dotted line so that the image actually folds over the cover, and a little bit of it will even be visible on the inside of the cover between where the end paper is placed and the edge of the cover. The same thing applies when you're designing your pages. You will see a dotted line around those page edges. That is the approximate trim line. And once again, many people feel that they should match their images exactly to that line or very close to it. That's definitely not a good idea for the same reason. If the trimming is not millimeter or fraction of a millimeter perfect, you may end up with a little bit of background that shows along a sliver of your photo edge. What you should be doing is extending your image well beyond that dotted line if you are designing a page that has a photo running off the edges in one or more direction. The second thing that sometimes happens is that if you're designing a book with standard paper, the books are bound by stapling from the side. So there's about a centimetre or just maybe a little bit less of your book design that will be hardly visible because it's where the staples are stapling through the page edge. That means that when you open your book, if you're using standard paper, you will get a little bit of a curvature, what I refer to as gutter bulge. And what you do not want to do, or want to try and avoid, is putting text, for example, close to that gutter, because then it means that possibly one edge of your text might be disappearing into that gutter, and maybe in the best case, you have to hold the pages open to actually read the text. Much better to put the text on the outer edge of the page, well away from the edge of course, but on the other side where it's more easily read and not disappearing on that curvy part in the binding area. The other thing that you should be aware of is if you have chosen a lay flat book, you will not have that curvature, but you should be careful if you should be opting for placing your images across that lay flat seam. You can have a slight millimeter, maybe 1 or 2 millimeters difference in the registration of the image placed on the left page versus the right page. So there might be a little bit of discontinuity between the left and right sides. If you've got generic homogeneous texture, that's really not an issue. But if you have any strong linear features, or the focus of the image is right in that binding seam, it might be a little bit visually jarring. We did see one book that went through with a wedding photo placed across that seam with the couple's faces right on that seam, and it definitely didn't turn out a good look. You should place the focus of the image either on the left page or the right page, and content that flows across that seam should be, as far as possible, not linear in nature. The third issue is sometimes when people are placing text in their book, they make the text size big enough so that they can read it on the screen. Now, everyone has a different sized screen. If it's a small screen and you've got maybe a large book, you have a tendency to make that text sometimes quite large when it's printed. So your book might end up looking like a child's reading book, where you've got these huge letters. To overcome that, what I always advise is that you choose a font and a font size and print it out in Word. Print that out on your home printer, and if it looks the right size and it looks readable, that's the size it will be when it's printed in the book, if you just use that same font and that same font size. So don't worry about how big or small it is on your computer screen. The settings you use for font and font size, if you print them in Word, that's how they'll end up when they're printed in your end photo book. You can use the magnifying buttons to zoom in if you feel you need to preview your text as you place it in the book on the page. And lastly, depending on how you're placing your images on your pages and how you might be modifying our templates or the images that have been used on the page, you can end up with some misalignment. Sometimes it's just a slip of the mouse. In other cases, your photo sizes are just a little bit different, or you want to show more of what's in the photos, or you're adding extra images to the page freestyle. It can result in some misalignment of images. For some people, that's not really an issue, and if the book is for you, that's not a problem. If it works for you, it isn't a problem. But in some cases, the misalignment is not so visible on the computer screen because everything is shrunk down, but when the book is printed, it's a tiny bit more obvious. So that's something just to be a little bit careful of. Once again, if you use the magnifying button and zoom in to your page preview, you can generally check if things are in relative alignment. In our masterclass, we go into quite some detail about how to align and distribute objects on your page, and we go through all of what you would need to know to address this type of issue. Otherwise, the advice is to simply use our existing templates as much as possible, because they are already pre-aligned for you. Okay, that covers the main issues that we do see coming through from time to time. Hopefully that's given you enough heads up to avoid them, and we look forward to seeing your books come through in due course. That's it for now. We'll see you next time.